Hey everybody, it's a very special Ask Jason brought to you by our friends at Pivotal Labs. We're doing another Launch Mobile Wearables and IoT Summit with our friends at Pivotal Labs, a great company. And we did this Launch Mobile Summit about 18 months ago. It went fantastic. We're going to have 3,000 people at Fort Mason in October, and we're going to look at some of the great companies in wearables, IoT. It's going to be amazing. And as part of that, we're going to do an Ask Jason series here for the next couple of weeks leading up to the conference. And so let's get to our first question.
Hey Jason, this is Mike from DC. Love the show and thanks for taking my question. Based on strong customer feedback, my team and I have developed a Bluetooth device to go with our mobile app. We've got an Arduino prototype in place and ready to go to a small-scale production. The only problem is we don't have the $50,000 or $60,000 to get rolling. We've got this lean startup system down for software, but hardware, we don't know. What would you recommend? Thanks for everything you do to help startups like ours live the dream.
Okay, great question, Mike in DC. Building software, you don't have all this hard cost associated, and you have hardware, and hardware is hard. There's really only 2 or 3 choices here. The first is, of course, you can raise some funding from friends and family. But if you're going to go down the hardware route, you're going to have a lot of dry powder. You're going to need a lot of money, and you're going to need expertise on your team. And the reason I invested in Butterfly was because Ben, who is the CEO, is an engineer who's been doing hardware for a decade. When software companies start to think they can make the jump from making a prototype with an Arduino processor and then go into full-scale production, they are deluding themselves. Yes, you can build prototypes, but then going to production is extremely difficult and complicated, and if you make mistakes, your 50 or 60 could turn into $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 awfully quick. And getting to market and getting distribution at Amazon or Apple, it's really, really hard. Do not do it unless you can get funding, or here's another possibility, you might be able to find somebody who really wants that piece of hardware and they want to buy 100 of them or 1,000 of them, right? So let's say you were making a device for dashboards that helped people who were, was for people who are driving. So it's like some sort of a dash cam that not only took a picture of what was going forward, it did it looking at the driver, and then it uploaded it to Periscope, right? It was some sort of camera system that did a 360-degree view of the cabin of the car and what was going on in front of it, right? Pretty interesting. It's a pretty good idea, actually. Well, you might not be able to do it yourself. You might think there's a market for it with consumers, but hey, what if you go to a bunch of truck drivers or UPS or somebody who's got 100 trucks or 1,000 trucks, and you say, hey, you probably want this on your 1,000 trucks. Would you like to order 1,000 of them for $300 each? And we can build these prototypes for you. We'll deliver them. We need a third on signing, a third on delivery, and third net 30. Finding a client who's willing to pay in advance is one of the best ways to test your idea. This is why Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Tilt, and these other services have been so transformative of the hardware space itself. Companies like Pebble or Butterfly, Birdie, they would not have been fundable if there wasn't this ability to prove that there was a market for hardware. It's not your God-given right to create a hardware startup. In fact, if we were sitting here 10 years ago, hardware was something that people didn't even think Apple should be doing. They thought it was the domain of Samsung and Sony. They thought anybody who went into the gadget business and the consumer electronics business would be toast. Things have changed radically. You can prototype radically quicker, and you can very easily raise money for it on Kickstarter. But listen, delivering the product is completely different, and we've seen a lot of high-profile failures when it came to delivery, delays, et cetera. For every time we have something as epic as the Oculus Rift, we have 2 things that are like Coin and Ouya, which were late and/or disappointments for people, and some things never even deliver. So be careful. Hardware is hard. Next question.
My question is on security and IoT. Everything is becoming connected: cars, electronics, even your coffee maker. When is it too much? Where is the moral line drawn as we integrate biometrics and IoT more and more?
Okay, this is a great question. Thank you for asking it. There are going to be a lot of security issues around the Internet of Things. When everything's connected, people tend to forget that they're on camera, that their heart rate is being recorded. All of these things are now being collected and sent to the cloud, and they're all going to be connected over wireless, which is easily hacked. But the human species adapts pretty quickly. We start to assume we're always under video surveillance. And in cities like Los Angeles and New York, and of course London is famously known for having a closed circuit television system that is huge, people get used to this fact. Now, there are some things that are disturbing about it, which is if we're always being tracked, and if somebody found out everywhere you were and that data gets breached, and all data does get breached at some point, it could cause problems. So you see people doing things today like turning off location services, not allowing certain apps to pull up location services. And one of the great things about this, and there is a moral dilemma here, if you collect the information and it gets hacked, who's responsible? And of course, we had the Ashley Madison hack, which has nothing to do with IoT, but it does have to do with hacking of sensitive information. And if you look at that situation, that company is done. It's toast. If you screw up your security as an internet company, it could spell the end of your company or $1 billion lawsuit or a $500 million lawsuit. So there are becoming ramifications to not having great security. And it's just something we're going to need to get used to. Society changes and the information we collect changes. And if you want to opt out of this, there's a very simple way to do it, which is not have an internet connection and not have these devices at your home. I do think that we should really be thinking about the ability for devices to have cameras and microphones removed. In other words, when you're using an iPhone, or that would be kind of difficult, but let's say a laptop. These laptops have phones cameras and microphones built into them. I would much prefer that the camera and the microphone be in a unit that could snap out. And what you're seeing, because it's so easy to hack somebody's camera on their laptop without turning on the green light, without them knowing, people are putting over their camera a Post-it note or a piece of gaffer's tape. I highly recommend this, actually. You don't have to be a nutcase to think that somebody could hack into your camera. People are hacking into cameras constantly, and audio, and turning on the audio at your phones. In fact, the FBI, the CIA, they've been doing this for years. They use cell phones as a way to track suspects and interesting people to them, and they'll turn on the microphones. This is not something just from the TV show Homeland. You can be certain that if you put a bunch of devices in your house, it will be hacked. So then you have to ask yourself, do I care if somebody knows the temperature of my house? Do I care if somebody has access to the security camera in my house? Yes. The temperature? No. So it's really going to be important for the companies that are releasing these products to make them secure. And it is possible to make them relatively secure. And you're going to have to just make some decisions and trade-offs of if you have cameras in your house, that they could be hacked, and is there a cost benefit? But it's a great question, and it's going to be about awareness and choice ultimately, and the ramification for companies who don't take it seriously. Great question.
Hi, Jason. This is Paul from Florida. I'm a long-term member of the TWiST Backchannel. I love it. Want to thank you for making that group available. Now, I have to tell you, I'm concerned and I'm worried, and here's why. When I listen to designers talk about putting up websites, pushing out videos, building SaaS apps, I hear them talk about making things not only mobile ready, but also mobile friendly. And it seems like it's gained so much momentum that mobile's actually even overtaking design decisions, and that's becoming the paramount goal. Now, that all sounds good because I know mobile's really taking off, but mobile consumers seem to like content that's much shorter, that's simpler, and let's face it, sometimes is real controversial or sensational. So with that, as a long-form content producer, somebody who's put blood, sweat, and tears into taking that deep dive on shows like TWiST, getting down to the nitty-gritty and making thought-provoking, deep, conscious types of content, how do you marry that up with competing in the world of mobile? Is the world of mobile going to dumb us down in terms of what we put out there as a product? And how are you going to fight against that as someone who pushes out content like TWiST? Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. It's a great question. We live in a mobile world, which means a small screen size. And it means people are snacking on content while they're online getting their $8 Phil's pour-over coffee or when they're on a bus. Now, this doesn't mean people stop going to movie theaters. It doesn't mean people stop watching things on big screen TVs, reading books, etc. But it does mean that a lot of consumption is going to start on mobile, and the majority of consumption is becoming mobile. When you talk to a lot of content sites, 60% is mobile. The counter to this is you have great things like, let's say, Audible, where people listen to long form and have a book with them all the time. People are watching TV shows on, actual full episodes of Game of Thrones on an iPad or on a smartphone. And, while it lacks the cinematic impact of a big screen TV, it does give you a little bit of intimacy, being close up to that screen, which to me feels interesting as well. Like you're very close up to it and you can see a lot of detail. So, there is definitely a trend here that people want, entertaining short news, but they have always wanted that, right? I mean, MTV was short attention span theater. And when you overload people with short attention span stuff, they eventually feel burnt out and manipulated, and then they go seek out the long form. So actually, there's an opportunity here to take shows like, say, This Week in Startup or Frontline and make short clips that induce people to watch the longer ones. And that's what you're seeing from my team here at This Week in Startups. We're actually making 4 or 5 clips from every episode every week, and we share them on Twitter, and we'll share them on Facebook and on YouTube, and then we tell people watch the full episode and do a deep link there. So I think there's an opportunity to give people a little taste, just like you might have a tray of hors d'oeuvres outside of a great restaurant. They cut slices of pizza into cubes, and they give you a little gateway drug of that little tiny cube of pizza. Now I'm getting hungry. And then you have to come in and buy the slice. Or they give you a little, thimble of the great green juice, and you go in and buy the $7 press juicery or $12 press juicery or whatever it is. So there are counter trends, and the way I'm handling it is I'll do short form stuff like actually Ask Jason, which we're doing right now, is a short attention span theater. We get all these done in under 10 minutes, sometimes as short as 5 minutes, and then we move on to the next question, and then it introduces people to the program, and they might say, you know what, I want to just sit back or get on the treadmill or go for a hike and listen to a 3-hour Krasaka episode. So the pendulum swings both ways, and you just have to understand the medium and what it's good for. Vine and Instagram, we can use those too. We're having a really good time on Instagram doing 30-second clips. So, where's the 20? I can't remember now. So all these trends they go back and forth, and you gotta leverage them and use both. Is I guess the big answer. Great question, Paul, and a great studio you got there.
Hey, Jason. Steve, here's my question. So I was just curious to know what your take is on the massive smartphone penetration in emerging markets, especially Android devices. How do you see this going forward, and what do you think are the opportunities that are untapped based on that? I'm asking that question primarily because when I'm having conversations with potential investors as I'm building a company targeting Africa and its diaspora, many still think iOS first. And in most of these areas, Android is king, or queen, should I say. So how do you see that dynamic moving forward? Thanks. Love the show.
Okay, this is a great question. Here in San Francisco and the Bay Area, we are iOS snobs, and for a good reason. All of the affluent customers use iPhones. It's the best phone, hands down. People agree on the high end of the market that they love iOS. So if you're building an app and you want to get the top of the market, the thinking today is go iOS. However, if you want to go for the masses, you want to go for the urban market, and you want to go for the international market, of course the answer is Android. So there is an issue where a lot of VCs don't actually use Android phones, and they haven't used one for years. They don't know how good they've gotten. Lollipop, cake, M&Ms, whatever, ice cream, they come up with all these silly names of the Android operating system, but it's getting better. It's getting slick. And so what I do is I have a Samsung phone, and I always buy whatever the latest Edge is. I have the Edge with the curve, Samsung Edge 6 or something like that. Amazing phone. I use it probably 40% of the time, and I use my iOS device 60% of the time because I want to stay on top of it. So if you're an entrepreneur, you should have both devices. And what I suggest is, if you can't afford to have 2 data plans, you just retire your existing device and buy the other latest device every year. And if you're a technologist, spending $1,000 on a device a year is probably a good use of proceeds, a good use of your money. Or you can, if you can't afford it, you can just buy the latest generation one used. But you really should get your head around how awesome the Android operating system is now and how massive the penetration of it is in other markets. What's particularly interesting about Africa and India and China and a lot of these markets is they're going to skip over, and we're talking about billions of people, are going to skip over using PCs. They may have used a PC but never owned one, or they may have really never used one. So their first experience with email, their first experience with the web, and their only experience will be mobile. They might never own a home computer. What's really interesting about Android as well is how affordable it is. We look at it and we say we have to have a retina screen, we have to have a huge screen, we have to have this, we have to have that. Well, if you're starting with nothing, an Android phone from 3 or 4 years ago is amazing. The fact that you have the web and you have Twitter and Facebook in your pocket, wow. And in fact, in a lot of these countries, they think that Facebook is the internet or WeChat or whatever it happens to be, Tencent, all these different messaging apps all around the world. People think that is the internet, the walled garden. So for investors, savvy ones understand it, and I think you just lead with statistics. You just lead with statistics. Listen, you can make more money on iOS in the United States because the App Store is more robust. Everybody has a credit card in there by default. But on a global basis, penetration is going to be Android, and you got to be there too. What I suggest for startups, of course, is to perfect yourself on one platform. So whichever is the dominant platform in your market, you want to start there. You want to rev your product, let's say 3 times. So get to version 1.3 or 3.0, however you want to do it, before you take on a second platform. Why? Well, if you have a leaky bucket, in other words, people download your app and nobody uses it, right? You paid for a download or you spent all this time acquiring a customer and then nobody winds up using it. Kind of sucks, doesn't it, to lose them? So fix the leaky bucket, make sure that people re-engage with the product and get value out of it. And then once it's perfected, then you can pixel by pixel, reimagine it, or just copy it over to the other platform, whether it's Android to iOS or iOS to Android. I hope that answers your question, and it's a great question.
Hey, Jason. My name is Aaron Gopp, and I'm with TripMates. I love the Ask Jason segment, so I thought that this would be a great opportunity to get your thoughts on web versus mobile strategy. TripMates is a social travel app, and we made the decision early on to be mobile first and possibly mobile only. We thought that it gave us the best opportunity to iterate, to deliver value to our customers, to find that pixel perfect design, to make sure that we're delivering concise value, not trying to be too much to too many people. And we really think that the future of travel booking is going to be in mobile. Now, again, we thought this to be a great strategy, but as we socialize this with our peers and our mentors, we got a lot of pushback. The argument is, by eliminating web, we eliminate a really big part of our market. Now, you've had the chance to see a lot of great companies come up, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on a mobile-first strategy, especially for an early-stage company that's looking for product-market fit. Thank you again for all that you and the launch team are doing. Keep up the great work, and I can't wait for launch scale.
Okay, this person has discerning taste. He's a super fan of This Week in Startups. He's coming to the Scale conference and hopefully to the Launch Mobile Wearables and IoT conference that we're doing with our friends at Pivotal Labs. And he makes some great points here. When you're building a startup, should it be mobile first? Should it be web first? Desktop web is what he's referring to. Or should it be mobile web first, using your Safari or Chrome browser? Gosh, it is mind-numbing, and everybody's got an opinion on this. Here is what you're dealing with. People love apps. Apps don't make any sense in a way. We have the mobile web. It's open. It works. Why wouldn't we just do everything in a browser? Well, the apps can do animations, and there's some sophisticated things you can do there, but the web keeps catching up, right? So it's just mind-boggling and confusing that in 2015, after we did all this stuff to have an open standard with the web for 25 years, that now we're reverting back? We're reverting back and saying, let's have multiple platforms? It is difficult. And you know what? Here's what you're going to hear from venture capitalists, because they have signaling. They want to build a billion-dollar company. They look and they see other billion-dollar companies and they say, Instagram is an app. Airbnb has an app. Airbnb has a website too, but it's got an app. Pinterest is crushing it with their app. They crushed it on the desktop, but now they're crushing it with their app. Uber is an app and an app only. You're not ordering Ubers from a desktop computer or from I think you actually can use I think you can use the mobile web too. You got to pick one thing and do it world class. Now, there is still a lot of desktop users when they're doing research, etc. But if you just look at your own behavior, you're really using your phone. You have it with you all the time. And if you leave it behind, you go home and get it. Literally, people will go home, 10 minutes in their Uber on the way to the office. They'll turn the car around to get that damn phone. That is all you need to know. The smartphone has one. Desktop, yeah, you'll get to it. But get the phone right first. Because the majority of the world is going to experience the internet through a mobile phone, not a desktop computer. And investors like to skate to where the puck is going. As the Wayne Gretzky quote from Steve Jobs, who quoted Wayne Gretzky, always said, I'm skating to where the puck is going. That's why I'm such a good player. I don't care where the puck's been. As an entrepreneur and as a venture capitalist, the venture capitalists are looking and saying, I did desktop stuff. I did kayak on the desktop. Now I want to do mobile. I want to take that opportunity where there's going to be billions of users compared to the hundreds of millions of people on the desktop. So it's just a numbers game, and it's where people are spending their time. That's the name of the game. You're going to have to do an app at some point, and Virgin America is making me crazy. They won't release an app. Southwest has an app. Virgin America keeps insisting we go to a website. I hate it. I want an app from Virgin America. I think less of Virgin America for not having an app. If a company doesn't have an app, you just think less of them. You just think they're not with it. So consumers have won. Apps have won. Steve Jobs won with the App Store. And as much as we all love open standards, there's no way to roll back the clock. So sometimes you have to know when the market has decided, and the market has decided, for better or worse, that apps are what consumers want. So embrace it. And you want to, give the VCs to a certain extent what they want. Sure, there'll be a Reddit on desktop, of course. But you know what? Somebody comes out with a better Reddit on mobile, they could displace Reddit. So there's another thing here at work, which is if you build a desktop and you do hit critical mass, you've just left this huge, huge opening where you can just totally get knocked over by a mobile company. So you want to be defensive as well. You want to play defense. You want to play offense, and you want to play defense. If you don't have a mobile strategy, somebody will come and they'll make a single function app that just kicks your ass, and you don't ever want to get your ass kicked. And a great company to look at here is Yelp. Yelp was a desktop app. They were search driven, and then they were desktop primarily. They were SEO driven, and they built a world-class app. And it's fantastic. I still use the website once in a while, but I'll sit at my desktop sometimes. And when I need to do a Yelp search, I'm so fast at doing it on my phone that I'll just go to the app while sitting in front of a computer with a keyboard. That tells you something. All right, great questions. I'm really impressed. And thank you to our partners, Pivotal Labs. You can go to pivotal.io/labs, pivotal.io/labs. They've helped the world's most recognizable brands and startups learn and adopt the methods that are required to build reliable, scalable software products. I have a lot of great friends over there. And Pivotal Cloud Foundry is the fastest growing open source product in history. That's right. And they've been doing agile startups for 25 plus years. And they were listed in Inc. magazine's top 10 web development firms to work with. If you want to build an app, if you want to build a business online, Pivotal Labs is a great partner. You can follow them at Pivotal Labs on the Twitter. Great friends over there, super smart cats. And they partner with us on this Launch Mobile and Wearables and IoT event every year. And the event has done tremendous, sold out every year. You can get information at launchmw.com. That stands for Mobile Wireless. Launchmw.com. Make sure you come to the event. It's October 15th and 16th at Fort Mason in San Francisco. 2 days, about 50 speakers, and myself, Sandeep from Pivotal, who's a good friend of mine, and Peter Rojas, who founded Engadget, Gizmodo, and is now at BetaWorks. Good friend of mine will be curating as well with me and doing some of the interviews. So it's going to be a tremendous event, and you're going to love it, and you're going to learn a lot. You're going to see a lot of cool stuff too. We're going to look towards where the puck is going at Launch Mobile Wearables and IoT. All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.